live. So
No?
that's great.
Welcome to From the Ground Up podcast. Thank you all so much for being here. So, Theportcitypythons.com. We actually have a sale on isopods going on. It is until tonight at 11:59. So if you're listening to this live, then you will be able to cash in on that deal. Otherwise, it may be beyond the expiration. That was a weird way to say that, huh?
Yes, I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But anyway, yeah, I'm glad. Thank you all who supported us during this, our little launch of the isopod stuff. And yeah, it's been a success. So thank you guys. I got stuff to ship out tomorrow. And yeah.
Upcoming in the near future, February 8th is going to be Southeast Carpet Fest in Melrose, Florida at Cody and Pia's. If you guys are heading down there, let us know. We will be there with a bunch of other keepers. And just because it's called Carpet Fest doesn't mean you have to own a carpet to come. It's a great place to talk to other snake keepers and just learn a lot of new things and meet a lot of new people. Also,
Absolutely.
April 26th, I think, is the Syracuse. What's the full name of it?
I'm not sure.
We're going to call it the Syracuse Reptile Expo.
It's the only one in Syracuse. So.
Yeah, so we will be there. So come check us out there.
Yes.
Other than that,
we are also sponsors of the show.
Oh, sponsors. Other than that, ready to introduce our guest?
Yes, I think it's about time.
Okay, our guest today is Scott Eipper. He is an author, a keeper, and a consultant, and our first Australia guest. Correct?
Yeah, so I want to kind of go through Australian snakes in captivity, frogs of Australia, dangerous creatures of Australia. Snakes of Australia. So he's really written a whole lot about
He's not
Australia.
just like a one-time author. He's like dedicated, intense, great content.
And his wife is right next to him, who is actually the co-author to their newest book, Scott and Ty Eipper. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Yeah, we're good. Thanks.
Doing great. So, I mean, I can barely write the caption to an Instagram post. It takes me about an hour. So how the hell have you written so many books?
We used to use cut and paste a lot. In all seriousness, I suppose it's like anything. You start off with a framework and work out what. I mean, the way we've done it is that we start off with the headings and then come up with subheadings and then work out how we're going to lay out the paragraphs and then just sort of fill in the blanks, I suppose. It's
and then argue about the blanks.
Yeah, then argue about the blanks and edit the blanks and chase down images and all the rest of it. It's anyone that says it's an easy exercise.
We've had no social life for about 3 years straight now with the Australian Geographic runs back to back.
And I mean, as two people who work together.
Oh, you stole my question.
No,
Dang it. No, see, great. I was about to ask,
arguing, so
what's the difference between writing a book by yourself and writing it with your significant other?
We're both pig-headed and stubborn, and we both have our own ideas, and we are both goddamn right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in other words, Ty's the boss and what Ty says goes.
Yeah, I was about to say Scott was being awfully quiet.
Publicly, but different story, I can tell you.
Did you each take chapters? Did you kind of?
Yeah, so
the good bits are mine.
So we picked out sort of chapters and stuff like that, and we authored chapters or groupings of stuff. So we're working on another publication at the moment, and the publication that we're working on together at the moment, Ty's writing, the monitors and the legless lizards.
I think we're supposed to say anything.
Well, we can leave it up to people's imaginations, but we've done snakes and we've done frogs.
So
there's a logical step here without saying it.
There you go. You guys sort of got an exclusive there.
And I mean, I know that you keep some amazing and beautiful lizards. So, I mean, is that really one of your focuses? I mean, is that one of your loves in comparison to snakes, or where do they rank for you?
It depends. I mean, I suppose for us, it's more
monitors. Really.
Species is what we like. I mean, Ty's got things that she really likes. I've got things that I really like. And, you know, I suppose that the interesting thing that we have with our collection is that, I mean, for starters, Ty's the collection manager. So if we want to be able to keep it, I've got to try and sweet talk her into saying, yeah, we really need this or we really need that.
We still end up with stuff I have no interest in keeping. So,
but yeah, look, we've got a fairly large collection. It's an educational collection, so we use the animals for training and also for displays at places like schools and educational centres. And we also use it for some things. We use research based as well. So we're trying to get some more reproductive information for some of the Australian elapids. So we're looking to specifically breed certain species to get raw data on that stuff, as well as, you know, it's always, as you know, it's always interesting to crack new species as well and try and breed things for the first time and stuff like that as well.
So are there still, I mean, big charismatic species of reptiles native to Australia that haven't been bred yet?
by us, yes. I think.
Yeah, there's stuff that we haven't bred, but then there's also stuff out there that it's been bred, but there's sort of questions about whether it's been bred without involvement of a wild specimen, shall we say? Where it realistically it's probably been captive hatched or captive born. And the other thing is too, it's all well and good to breed something once. It's another thing altogether to replicate it. So, you know, you can ask it, I suppose. It's always good to actually have that formula and know what you're actually doing as opposed to just sort of guessing your way through it. The other thing is too, the taxonomy of Australian snakes as well is fairly sort of in its infancy in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stuff still to be described. I can think of about 10 different species of snake that's undescribed here in the country and probably about 20 or 30 species of lizard. So
what do you think is keeping that taxonomy from progressing?
We have a certain person here in Australia that we don't want to validate his work.
It's a dirty word. Let's steer off that subject.
Wait, so is that who you copy and paste for your books or nah?
Oh, Dow sales just went down. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we are coming to the States. You insult me like that again, and we might pay a visit.
Can that bit be edited?
No. In all seriousness, look, without sort of going into it too much, there is a lot of problematic things going on with stuff that certain people have named, and it's all well and good for. We're not saying that you shouldn't have to. You should follow a set of guidelines. You know, I mean, when you're writing a scientific paper, it should be peer reviewed. Once it's peer reviewed, then it goes through, and there's certain levels of evidence-based work that needs to be followed out, and you know you can't just slap names on things and expect people to use them. And I suppose that's what's happened. And unfortunately, you know, if you slap enough names on enough animals, eventually some things are going to stick. So.
Very diplomatic, darling.
So,
should we leave that one there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. But yeah, that has been a bit of a problem here in Australia with certainly with some things that people have chosen not to progress research on the basis that they were going to validate the names of somebody else and do the work that they probably should have been done in the first place. So.
And now out of those 10 or 20 species, is it just that they need to be split from existing known species, or is it completely unknown to science?
Look, it's essentially species that end up getting split from other ones. but at the same time, I mean, it's a lot of those are fairly obscure things as well, not so much stuff that's in captivity. But I mean, the pygmy banded python is an interesting example of that. There's been some work done on it to suggest it's a different species. That bloke went and slapped a name on it, and then suddenly people aren't really interested in doing the genetics on it to really work out whether or not it is a distinct taxon or whether it's just a phenotypic variation of Antarrhiza in a compact, a hybridization zone between Maculosa and Stimson. So, and that's the problem, in that particular instance. You've got Stimson's pythons that come up through the western part of the Cape York Peninsula. You've got spotted pythons that come up the side of eastern Queensland onto Cape York. The two animals sort of abut quite close to that area where you get the pygmy bandeds. And the question then, one of the main questions that a lot of people have got is it just a population of hybrids, I suppose, between Stimsons and Mackies?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the resulting crossover is this phenotypic animal that people are calling pygmy banded Stimsons, or is it a entirely different species and maybe Antarrhiza radiated from that particular spot, which has caused further speciation in the group? But until somebody runs the genetics, there's going to be a whole heap of questions. And over here we can't just go and collect snakes out of the wild. We've got to get scientific research permits and things like that to do that. So to get those permits, it's quite a lot of work. So then to invest a whole heap of time and work in effectively validating or not validating someone else's work, so to speak, it takes a lot of the push out of it, I suppose, and you could spend that same energy on something that you don't have those same headaches with. So it's problematic here. We've also got problems with sort of dueling nomenclature as well, where you've got a name that's been validly published under the ICZN code, and then people aren't using that name because someone else has come along and done a better paper, but it's come out after the fact, and they're using that name. So, the name Malayo python and Broghammerus come to mind there. Where Broghammerus was described 10 years before Malayo python. It's got the same type species being reticulatus. And so by the rules of the ICZN, you should use the name Broghammerus. But there was a bloke by the name of Heinrich Kaiser et al. In 2013 put a paper out basically saying we shouldn't be using those names, and these are the reasons we shouldn't use those names. And a lot of those reasons are quite valid, but they are contrary to the ICZN. And so there's been a case brought before the ICZN that they've failed to rule on as yet. So until such time they rule on that, there's always going to be sort of some problems with which name is the correct name to use. At the end of the day, though, the reticulated pythons could give two shits. They don't read books. It only becomes a headache for us authors.
That's what's weird, is that it's something that seemingly doesn't matter except for our own classification. But also it seems like something where like egos can get involved. It doesn't seem like there's a definitive percentage amount of deviation between species and stuff like that. And everything's kind of argued. Like, it seems like just such an involved thing.
So I suppose the one thing I was talking to a mate of mine about it a few years ago. The arbitrary percentile differences, and this is X. So many percentile differences of genetic divergence to be a subspecies, and so much should be a species. And why can't we just put a number and draw a line in the sand and say anything above this is this and everything below this is this? And the problem is it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is things evolve at different rates. And so evolutionary clocks change depending on species, and how quickly something mutates and evolves is different. So something that lives on one hill, doesn't move, tends to get a fair bit of genetic isolation, and so the genetics in that location stay put, and so you get a higher rate of mutation, whereas something that moves a lot gets a lot of movement, and so there's a lot of genetic diversity in that population. And so things evolve at different rates. So because things evolve at different rates, it's very hard for us as people to come along and try and put our arbitrary boxes on the shelf, and we're going to move the snakes into this box, and this is going to go into this box, and we're going to divide the boxes like this, and we're going to have it all very nice and neat. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So because it doesn't work like that, we're always going to have problems putting square pegs in round holes, so to speak. And so while the animals know what's up, the way we're trying to shuffle them doesn't quite work as well as we'd like it to. And so there's always going to be change, and there's always going to be differences. And to compound that, as science gets better and we get better resolution and we understand genetics better, and we understand concepts better, then when we go back and revisit things that we looked at maybe 20 years ago, because our resolution is so much better and we understand so much more, we end up getting different conclusions from the same sort of data set, so to speak. So, you know, imagine looking at a television 20 years ago versus a television now. The television you look at now is, you know, 1080p, HD, blah, 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 versus what it looked like 20 years ago, you know what I mean? So there is differences there. So compound that with the internet and people being able to publish papers very, very rapidly, it becomes a very difficult, interesting beast, I suppose.
And how much more interesting is it? I mean, you guys have 1 foot, it seems, in the private sector, like hobbyist keepers, one side, 1 foot in like the scientific community. I mean, how silly is it when, say, over here, it's all about having a pure jungle carpet python? I mean, how arbitrary is that even in comparison to, you know, trying to describe them in a scientific context?
I mean, the problem that we've got, and I suppose carpets are a great example for that. You know, I mean, a lot of people recognise 6 subspecies of carpets. The genetics as presented at the moment don't necessarily suggest that. There is some work being done at the moment by Warren Booth, Nick Mutton, Justin Julander, and a couple of others that are looking at the carpet python genetics at a much more higher resolution than previously analysed. And, you know, they're probably going to come up with some slightly different sort of versions of what we think is the actual fact now. I read through, there's a couple of papers by Leslie Rawlings and Steve Donnellan, which are geneticists out of South Australia, really well-respected guys, really know their stuff. And then there was another paper by Clavaglia and Donnellan, and they looked at the forensic implications of carpet pythons and the genetics. And in both of those papers, they basically give the recommendation there's no genetic differences between, say, McDowellii and Shanei, which is usually pronounced Chenii, which is incorrect. It's actually Shanei for the jungle carpets. Variegata, Harrisoni. So Harrisoni, Variegata, Shanei, and McDowellii and Spilota, so diamond pythons, jungles, Papuan carpets, top-end carpets, and coastal carpets are all genetically the same animal. And so we've regarded them as races in our book. Inland carpets are sufficiently different at subspecies level, whereas the western carpet python, Marilia imbricata, and Brettelii, I should say, the Centralian carpets are different at full species levels. So that's probably the best way to reflect it. Now, somebody will come along, no doubt, and either use next generation sequencing and nuclear DNA, and they may get a different outlier and say that, and different resolution, say, oh, well, this one's different to this and this one's different to that. And if that's the case, great, we're all for it. But at the moment, the genetic evidence at the moment suggests that they're all the one, basically all the carpets are the one species.
And do you generally fall into the idea of being a lumper or a splitter? Do you care?
I am.
Oh no, Australian internet strikes
Oh
again.
no.
You're never gonna know. But seems like he would be a lumper from that last answer,
right. He
Oh.
See, Ryan in the chat just said, did he just say I can cross my gelatin and my Brisbane? And I feel like when you tell too many people that things are the same, they start getting bold.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's kind of built on a bad foundation, meaning that it's built on animals that are from zoos, quotation marks, that have been imported from certain areas in Eastern Europe.
Right.
There's no solid evidence, right?
Right.
We're taking someone's word
but
from
the
it
evidence
for
is
it
doing
somewhere.
the DNA testing. That's what
Yeah.
gives you the evidence, right?
Right. Which so far, like he said, to our knowledge, it seems like it would all be the same, which is something that we've kind of accepted as North American colubrid people. I feel like we accepted the fact that a corn snake's a corn snake, even if it's the rosy reds that are down in the Keys, which used to be, considered different, and all the way up to New Jersey when we have corn snakes up there, or corn snakes in the sandhills of North Carolina. Right. They all look different, but are genetically the same. Even the rosy rat snakes, honestly, have a different body structure to them. So if anything's going to be, a full species, it's going to be that one.
It's going to be
it's just very.
It's also, I think, we always talk about like, oh, how many people are interested in snakes? How many people are doing this research for that study that Scott just brought up? I would love to know like the sample size of it. I mean, think about how many carpets are we truly studying? And if
they're in Australia, so I feel like
true, they have a lot. But I guess, he talked about comparing like Nick's line and Nick's DNA, like.
Which is interesting that we have people that are from the private hobby, but obviously Warren Booth obviously has a PhD, right, as also Justin Julander. So it's like they're both involved in the scientific community and in the hobby, which I think is really awesome. And they're seem to be bringing it into their own hands. Can you say?
Oh, his phone overheated.
Oh no! It was on the dash in Australian summer. That probably makes sense.
Yes. Oh no. Well, we got like 20 minutes. Oh geez.
I'm sure it's like, eventually.
He doesn't want to, blow all his gas running the AC to cool down the phone. We had a feeling this wouldn't work great.
Yeah, it's hard when you're on the road, not to mention on the road in a foreign country.
Definitely trying to connect all that. Yeah, but it's just
it's not like he's in like East Africa or anything, but
if he does come back, I would love to know like how is dichotomy the right word?
Go with it.
I don't know. The dichotomy of Australia in the sense like you brought up earlier, like the hobbyist private keeper side versus the like science side. Because we talk a lot.
Think is interesting.
We talk a lot to guests we have from America about like, oh, okay, and I want to know like how respected is the research that the private keepers are doing is with these animals that are all over Australia, like since carpets are all over the private I don't know. I would love to know how their
bar's a bit higher than ours. We can just pick up a corn snake at a reptile show. Theirs is a little bit different.
True.
Welcome back.
So sorry, guys. The phone overheated.
No, we're sorry.
Good. Everything's trying to work against us tonight.
Is that working now? Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, you sound great.
So we literally left on a question. Are you a lumper or a splitter?
I thought we did that conveniently. Okay, so Yeah.
Oh, phone's going again, guys. Sorry.
Just cover the-
You just
okay. No, in all seriousness,
bumper. There's no way.
no, no. You know what? It really depends on some things. Yeah, lump them. Other things, we haven't even scratched the surface on how many distinct taxa there are, and so it really depends. I suppose it's a case by case basis. I think that some things are overly split, and I think some things are haven't been split enough. And I think some people will get better resolution in certain things when they get split out. A classic example of that is the Cunningham skinks here in Australia. They're a beautiful lizard, very, very distinct, and there's lots of different species that are currently lumped under Agurnia cunninghamite. So yeah, it depends. And then you look at carpet pythons, and we really struggle to pick the differences between the subspecies. And the interesting thing that I find is that I listen to people overseas, and they go, "Oh, that's definitely a diamond," or "That's definitely this," or "It's definitely that." And I'm like, how many wild individuals have you actually seen of these things? When you get out in the bush and you start looking at the variation in some of these animals, it's absolutely incredible. And so, you guys are tending to be limited to fairly limited gene pools, and because you're limited to fairly limited gene pools themselves, you're not getting a lot of phenotypic variation. So you get this look that happens to be a jungle carpet, or this look that happens to be a coastal carpet. When in actuality, when you go out and actually find jungle carpets and coastal carpets, the variation in them is amazing.
Right. We're just looking at it from, like a speck in this whole pool of all of it. We're looking at these that came from these couple of animals.
And there's probably literally our bloodlines come from like a couple of animals. So
right,
they all look the same. Like,
of course, they're going to look very similar.
I suppose to relate it to you guys, I suppose, is think of it like the Okeete's corns, Can you imagine if every corn snake that was in captivity that's over in the States is an Okeete corn or descended from Okeete corns? They're all going to look sort of similar, but they're going to be, you're going to get variation when they've been bred so many times. But you guys, as you know, they've got corn snakes from the northern part of their range versus the southern part of their range. Go different counties, west, south, different soil types, different rock types, different vegetation, all influences the phenotypic variation of the species. And so, a bright red corn snake is not going to do great on dark black soil. And so the bright red corn snakes on the black soil are going to get picked off by the birds of prey. And it's exactly the same here. So, you get animals that live in the rainforest here that are from 2,500 kilometers south of where you get jungle carpets, and they look identical to a jungle carpet python. It just happens to be a carpet python that's evolved to live in dense, closed rainforest. And so they have evolved to have this strong, distinct color pattern. They're fairly small, and they're high contrast in color. There's no differences in the scalation. There's next to no differences in the genetics. So, they're probably just the same thing.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously we have fights over. North American colubrids seem to have a lot of similarities with your carpet pythons. I mean, we have eastern rat snakes that are black, that are yellow, that are red, and like very bold colorations that are seemingly very different, same species. And no one wants to accept that either.
Well, because a lot of people want to lean on the phenotype. That's what we see first. And so we want to rely heavily
on breeders, that's kind of all we care about a lot of times, which I think is a little bit unfair.
Yeah, I suppose that's just it, isn't it? It's hard for people to embrace change as well. I still hear people talk about canebrake rattlesnakes as being distinct from timbers, and at the end of the day, that Acroportus got slumped back within Horridus, I don't know how long, about 20 years ago, I think now. So, yeah, and people still use that. Oh, yeah, that's a canebrake, not a timber. Well, genetically they're the same animal.
Yeah, don't say timber rattlesnake in the southeast of the United States, because I mean they're pretty serious about the cane brake.
Mentally noted.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. We'll try not to offend, but we're pretty good at it. So, I'm pretty good at offending people. So, I like to say
you have things like that, and where like they call rat snakes chicken snakes or coop snakes, or like there's a lot of cultural usages of common names, basically.
Yeah. And look, common names are a whole nother headache again. The amount of things that are called yellow-bellied black snakes over here, it could be a green tree snake, a tiger snake, a copperhead, a brown snake, potentially a species of black snake as well.
And everyone thinks the worst straight away.
Yeah, so it's different.
I mean, is it best to assume? Because I mean, I wouldn't be one to be able to identify snakes in Australia. I mean, is it best to assume most things not to touch unless it's a carpet python? That would be my rule, I feel like.
You just stay away from the pointy end. That's all. It's okay. I mean, look, I've been catching venomous snakes for 35 years. I've been catching venomous snakes. So it was all asked when I was younger. There was no skill involved. It was all complete fluke. And it's I suppose a testament as to how much snakes don't really want to bite people. And so I was being very lucky as a young fella. And then as I got older and got bolder, I ended up making a few mistakes and ended up going to hospital for making more mistakes. That's okay. I'm still here. And, now the fact that I'm allergic to snake venom has sort of pushed me in the role that I am being especially careful when I'm dealing with venomous snakes, regardless of how toxic they might be. So stuff that is generally regarded as harmless to people, I'll still handle in the same manner as the way I handle a taipan or a brown snake.
So if you don't mind going back and me asking, where did those accidents happen with you relocating snakes or with you keeping them?
I am so sorry that was just, we didn't get that at all.
No, you're okay. So to go back as far as, did that happen when you were privately keeping or when you were relocating snakes, as far as what's kind of the higher risk?
It's about the same. The problem is with, sorry, go for it.
I think you get a bit more complacent at home, to be perfectly honest. So for cleaning, you just get in and you do. I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, so I'll grab everything with a hook, because even a python will make me rash up and itch for hours. But say you move a snake because it needs a bigger enclosure or something like that, you just get in and you do, and you don't think, and then all of a sudden, oh, hello.
Yeah, that cage you opened that had a carpet python in it a week ago has now got a taipan sitting in it or something like that, and you're like, oh, well, hang on, I should have really read that cage label before I opened that box.
Music goes on and you're just like, yep, poo, more poo, more poo, more poo, and you just get stuck into it. You don't think. And
so are you sensitive to even like cleaning out the enclosures and stuff like that of your venomous animals?
Yeah, I wear gloves now. So I wear gloves and I'm pretty sort of careful with that. We've gone away from loose substrates as well. So we've got stuff on paper. Loose substrates produce dust. Dust produces aerosolizes venom. And so it gets it up in the air when you're sweeping up the urates and all the rest of it. And so as a result, we've gone onto a paper system and we don't have the urates or anything like that. You walk into the snake room and it's a snake building and it doesn't really smell like snake anymore, which is nice.
It doesn't attract bugs either, which is good.
Yeah, that's always nice. So I mean, I've heard of this happening to so many different venomous keepers, or even people with mealworms and different things like that. So how does that exposure, do you know exactly how that works?
Well, the way I found out about it for me is I actually got bitten by something that went into anaphylactic shock.
So we're out bush. He has to be nice to me, or I'll hide that EpiPen. I'm kidding. I wouldn't.
So is this something to
So
be able to get antivenom in time? I mean, you would just go into shock, or?
yeah. So if I get a bite now, I put on one of these things, which is a broad compression bandage. And then once I've got the bandage on, I call the ambulance and sit there quietly and be calm and all the rest of it. I've got an EpiPen, so if I start to feel like I'm having an allergic reaction to one of the proteins within snake venom, then I can administer an EpiPen and go from there. I also got Phenergan, which is a fairly strong antihistamine, and so the first thing I'll take after I've placed the bandage on is I'll take a couple of Phenergan tablets, which will sort of help counteract any histamine reaction, which is an allergic reaction first. And then if I still start to go downhill, then I'll administer the EpiPen and move on from there.
But here's where we should say that we really don't get bitten that much at all. It hasn't happened in ages, and I shouldn't say that out loud because I know what's going to happen tonight. But yeah, it's not a regular occurrence.
So and I mean, I've seen your facility. It looks like a hermetically sealed lab, underground bunker full of snakes. So I'm guessing you have some protocols and stuff like that. So what are some of your protocols in your facility?
I'm going to guess what you said then because it just went like you were sitting underwater. But our facility is set up in such a way that the enclosures are built around the outside of the wall, so nothing can get behind. So if a snake gets out and goes onto the floor, it goes into the center of the room as opposed to behind banks of enclosures or anything silly like that. It's a two-door entry system, so the door into the building itself is snake-proof. That gets you into a foyer area, and from that you can either go to the quarantine room or you can go into the main room. And once you go into the main room and the quarantine room, both doors have got windows into them, so we can see who's on the other side of the door. We can make sure it's safe to enter. If it's safe to enter, then we can go in. We do a quick walk around the room, make sure that there's nothing on the floor, making sure everything's where it should be, and then we go through and clean out the animals or feed the animals or do whatever we need to do. So
the sinks are also covered, so if something did get out overnight, nothing could get through there.
We've got heating sensors in the building, so if the building gets above a certain temperature, we can turn the heating off remotely.
We don't have an inheritance.
The air conditioning system in there keeps the room the room below. We talk in Celsius over here too, so I'm not going to do the conversion because I don't know what the Fahrenheit conversion is, but the room sits between 29 and 27 degrees Celsius, with a nighttime drop down to about 20 degrees Celsius, and then the enclosures themselves have a hot spot that gets up to about 35 or so degrees Celsius. So the animals can shuttle on and off the heat. We have very large enclosures for our animals, so the animals can sort of stretch out and move around and stuff like that. And we've found that it makes a big difference. We've got double glazed windows in the ceiling that allow moon phases to influence the behavior of the animals as well. So if you go into our building on a full moon, most of the nocturnal stuff is all huddled away as it usually would be. Whereas you go in on the new moon, where you don't actually have a moon out at all the nocturnal stuff's out and moving around. The roughy coloration, the roughies change color between night and day. That's really prominent. We also have, because there is those glass windows in the roof, we have a crepuscular period there at dawn and dusk, and it does make a big difference to the animals. So.
And you'll see them all sunning themselves in that particular spot, and they will follow the sun as it goes across the room as much as it allows, obviously, in their enclosures.
So it seems like you guys are
seeking the color temperature of the light.
Yeah, and it seems like you guys are super in tune with trying to use nature in order to kind of influence your captive keeping. So do you guys
try and keep as much stuff outside.
and
So-
yeah, I know that you guys are keeping outside as well. And I heard you mention, I think it was in a podcast before about like things like UV and stuff like that. Have you started to or thought about introducing UV to your animals that are inside?
Yeah, we've got UV on some of the animals inside already. Yeah. So yeah, I think UV light is in particular its use with snakes is considerably underrated at the moment. Only because snakes don't tend to be as susceptible to something like metabolic bone disease as a lizard or a crocodile. And that's largely due to the whole diet that snakes are generally fed on. But there is some papers out there that talk about bone density in animals that have been given UV as opposed to animals that haven't got UV. So, we like to think that, the animals that we're keeping, we're custodians of those animals, and it's our requirement, I suppose, is to keep them to the best of our ability and keep them in such a way that is not only the best for the animal, but we also want to make sure that we're continually looking to improve. And so something that may have worked for us 10 years ago, we're happy to keep doing that. But if there's a better way, then we're always open to improving on our systems. So, when we built the building itself, it's a building that is designed for reptile keeping. And, I spoke to a number of herpos and said, look, what do you like about your room? What do you not like about your room? We'd also both of us have been keeping over 20 years before we built that room as well. And so we built the room in such a way that we weren't going to make the same mistakes that we made over that 20-year period. I mean, I'm sure you guys, if you could redo the room that you've got the snakes in now, I'm sure there's things that you would change, whether it be widening the aisles a little bit
or buying
making
a new
so that the blinds
just moving, just living somewhere else. It's really what it is.
What was that? Sorry.
You're living in like 2050 and we're in like 1904 with the way you guys are living in the future. If anyone hasn't seen their facility, it is just outrageous and everything's stainless steel and it's beautiful. Nothing like ours, unfortunately.
Don't clean it. You might change your mind.
So last time I saw it, you guys were still using, it looks like you guys were hybrid as far as you were using some tubs and some cages. Do you still utilize both of those?
Yeah, we still, particularly for the juveniles and stuff like that, we've got tubs and stuff like that for them. Certainly some species like death adders and stuff like that do really well in tubs. Whereas taipans, we've found the taipans do heaps better in the enclosures.
They do, but I also think taipans hatch them out, and I think they do better in the little Systema tubs because they're a bit harder to see out of and see in. They see the movement walking past, so they sort of get used to you. But then when we put them in the actual enclosures around the room, they can see us and they're a lot more comfortable. So I think something like a taipan needs the initial settling in period, shall we say, to get adjusted to you.
Yeah, it seems like that's like a lot of people are, it depends on the species at this point.
Yeah.
And like, I suppose that the one thing for us is that, and we both had the same thing, is when we moved one of our olive pythons, we put our olive pythons in their large enclosures for the first time. It was pretty crazy to see how quickly they stretched out and how often now they sit stretched out like wild olive pythons do in the wild. You see olive pythons in the wild, they sit in an ambush position where, the body's actually quite stretched out. Whereas when we had them in smaller cages before, they were always sort of hunched up and stuck up and things like that. And, at the end of the day, we love reptiles and amphibians. And so from our point of view, if we love them, we want to make sure that we're giving them the best we can. And I suppose it's the same thing with the outdoor enclosures. So, we've got lace monitors outside. We've got parentes outside.
Everything is toad-proof, though. Okay,
Yeah,
toad-proof. We learned our lesson the hard way, and very small mesh.
You know,
And there's feral cats.
Yeah, blue tongue lizards are outside. We've got diamond pythons outside. We have lots of different skinks, sand goannas, Burton's water monitors. All that stuff's kept outside because it gets the best lighting, the best variation in temperature.
We're not going to lie. There's a lot less cleaning too when it's outdoors.
But then too, I mean, the way that we design those enclosures is also designed for two people as well. So it's designed so we've got food doors that we feed the monitors through. So when we go into the enclosure, for cleaning or whatever, the goanna doesn't necessarily associate that with food. So, you know, even though our largest parenti is a bit over 6.5 feet, I suppose, and that animal can cover
one side to
5 meters, 6 meters in like a blink of an eye.
A very excited leap.
And you know, they've got teeth on them that's about 10 millimeters long, and you know, they literally can shred a rat completely in half. They're like velociraptors, I suppose. And you know, you walk into that enclosure, and I walk in with a fairly decent sized snake hook that I can sort of Zorro the bloody goanna away from me if I really needed to. But I don't tend to have that problem because the animal associates the food doors with food as opposed to the entry door for us. And it's little things like that we've learned to try and influence the way we keep. We've got underground hides for a lot of our animals, and so we can access the animals in the underground hides. Those underground hides have got a lid on them that we can then open so we can actually get to the animal that's under the ground. But then that has its complications as well with flooding, so we need to make sure that we can get to those underground enclosures without having flooding issues. So it's a lot of work to figure all this stuff out. And it helps that I've got a trade background as well. So,
is it just you two?
Because I'm a trade. Sorry?
Is it just you two?
Yeah, our youngest son, it's really bad. Our youngest son is like 20. He's still at home. He's had reptiles since he was 2. So he's grown up with them. He's totally fine. We wouldn't trust him with the elapids, but he knows what to do, etc., etc. But yeah, it's us 3. But
he had this is how he's literally grown up with reptiles. So years ago, we had we've got a crocodile by the name of Freddie. And, you know, we got called into the school. And when we got called into the school, they turned around and said, you know, we've got to talk to your son, talk about your son. He keeps saying that he's lying and stuff like that. And we're like, well, that's really unusual. He doesn't lie. And he's literally one of those kids that never lies. You know?
It's black and white. It is what it is.
And so we said, all right, look, we'll come into the school and we'll have a conversation about it. And they're like, yeah, he keeps telling us that he's got a pet crocodile called Freddie and this, that, and the other. I'm like, yeah, he does. And they're like, what?
Face was priceless.
And then it was very quickly, it was like, oh, could you bring it in for show and tell? And so we wanted to bring it in for show and tell anyway. I mean, we've got a demo business, so that's fine. But we wanted to make sure that the kids weren't teasing him or anything like that about this mythical crocodile that's at his house. It's nothing quite like bringing a crocodile into a room full of kids, that's for sure.
Especially when they think that the kid was just lying and not, you know. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Apologies from the teacher that day.
So
Katie was the popularest kid in class all day.
That's awesome.
That story kind of leads me in. I have some like total like basic level, I know nothing about Australia questions.
Yeah,
so what are, you know, most people's views of you guys being snake keepers and working with reptiles and all of that? Like, just kind of enlighten us Americans on.
It's changed a lot. It really has. I can remember 20 years ago, and you have a snake, and that would be the line that you get rid of fellas with. Oh, I've got snakes, and they'd be like, oh, okay, we're cool. No. Now every second person has a reptile of some degree. It's changed a lot. It's nothing like the States, But yeah, it's changed a hell of a lot.
Yeah, and I suppose to add to that, you know, the other perception is that we ride kangaroos to work and shit like that. We only do that down to the local pub. We don't do that to work all the time.
Get your wife beat up.
You know, in all seriousness, I suppose I think there's a lot of people keep venomous over here, but there's a lot of people that don't keep venomous. They only keep pythons as well. So the big difference, I suppose, is the way that we maintain and handle venomous snakes in Australia as opposed to the rest of the world. And it's got nothing to do with the toxicity of the snake. If you're bitten by a red-bellied black snake, which is one of our not the most toxic, dangerously venomous species, you know, you can lose fingers, you can lose your hand, you can lose an arm. It's going to suck. It hurts like hell. And I'm speaking from experience there. It really hurts to be bitten by black snake. But you're probably not going to die. But one of the things that you do is you handle them with hooks and tailing. So you tail the snake and then you use a hook to support the body. So your hand's on the animal. And, you know, compare that to a lot of the places overseas, they use things like pilstrom tongs and stuff like that. Tongs do not get used for handling snakes in Australia at all. No one uses tongs.
Just what you say, because they're going to be offensive again.
Is that the nature? That's just the nature of these fast-moving elapids. It just works out that you kind of got to grab them by the tail.
Well, you know, you don't carry tongs because they're heavy and cumbersome and all the rest of it. Can you imagine trying to grab all of your colubrids with tongs?
Yeah, it's not happening.
Not gonna work.
It's not really going to work, is it?
Yeah.
You know, and so it's all well and good for a sedentary rattlesnake or a viper or something like that doesn't move. You can probably pick them up with a pair of tongs. But then I'm worried about crush injuries and stuff like that. So I'd just much rather use a hook.
For the most part, what we see here with tongs is a nervous handler and they're doing more damage.
Yeah.
Which is why no one here basically uses tongs. We prefer to go for a hook.
And what's the general consensus?
And we use things like this.
What's the general consensus as far as like getting calls and stuff like that? Are people usually good at identifying snakes and knowing what's
terrible?
Terrible. We've had the biggest, deadliest snake in the world, and it was a little baby blue tongue.
Yeah, I've been
a leg difference there.
I've been called out for blue tongues. I've been called out for rubber snakes. I've been called out for green tree frogs, dog poo, slugs, lots and lots of stuff.
You're laughing, but when it's like 3 a.m. and it's not a snake, it's not funny. so
one of the things that we do is we do pull snakes out of houses for people if they're if they're posing a threat to a person or not. But we do free identifications as well. We'd much rather the snake stay at the person's house. If we can try and convince them on the phone to say that, hey, no, you're better off leaving that carpet python there. He's getting rid of the rats that are in your property, or that green tree snake. He's only going to cruise through, he'll eat a couple of frogs, and then he's going to keep moving. Save yourself $100 and don't get us to come out. And usually I'm pretty good at talking ourselves out of work for that. So, but every now and then, you know, you do get, you know, a brown snake in a person's toilet or something like that. And so you go out there and you grab the brown snake and you put it into a bag and then you take it a few k's down the road and let it go. You know, and it's fairly simple. I pick up a brown snake like you pick up a pen. You get pretty used to it. So, but you take safety precautions. You know that we don't do the whole video thing, and when we're catching venomous snakes, other people do, and that's fine if they want to do that.
Our
but
main
then you
concern
find
is
that
the person, they're usually freaking out when it's a brown or something like that, and we're not there for, you know, publicity, so to speak. We'd rather just ease their fears and move on.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too is that then you start to focus on the fact that you've got a camera on you or you're live feeding something or whatever. You know, we'd rather just do the job that we need to do and not worry about a camera in our back.
we're sort of between a lot of projects, so we don't have time. We prefer to get in there. Not that I do many call outs at all. I will admit I'm not a fan of brown snakes, and that was my luck. So yeah, we don't record much at all, or even take pictures of the releases. It's just in and out and then back to home, really, isn't it? And riding and cleaning poo and all the fun stuff.
That's the most glamorous part of keeping reptiles, isn't it? Cleaning shit.
Yeah, and that's why I don't do it.
It's the most plentiful part of it too.
That's my other
I like that.
My other Australia kind of question is, you've talked, or Joe brought up earlier, how you guys are in the captive side of it, but you're also you're out there and you're relocating and all that kind of stuff. So what is the connection between like captive keepers and say like the scientist aspect of it, or people just herping, like all those different kind of camps with reptiles? How do they all interact in Australia?
Poorly. Poorly is the best way to describe it. Look, there seems to always be a disconnect wherever you go between academics and private keepers and zoological institutions and researchers. It isn't always. You get people that sort of fit in all camps, and then you got others that think that their camp is the best, and so they sort of hold the flag up and say, hey, you should do it our way, or whatever. At the end of the day, though, we're all people that have a mutual love for reptiles, and sometimes it would be better leaving the egos at the door, and the ego tends to get in the way for some people. And look, don't get me wrong, we all like our ego stroked.
That's every camp has ego. That's what connects us all. We all have egos. Yeah. Every camp.
Every camp has got egos, and every camp likes their ego stroked, and everyone thinks that they're the best. And so I suppose that what we try to do as much as possible is that we try to listen to other people's points of view, and then we choose whether or not we're going to take it on or not. And that's a private choice for us, as opposed to telling everyone to do it this way. I suppose the other thing is too, I mean, we've both been keeping reptiles upwards of 30 years. And I suppose that the one takeaway for us is that, when I'd kept reptiles for 5 years, I thought I knew a lot about reptiles. 10 years down the line, I thought I knew heaps about keeping reptiles. And then at about 15 years worth of keeping, I started to realize I don't know as much as I think I do. And now the way I look at it basically is I know stuff all about reptiles. I know a tiny little bit about a bit, and there's always stuff for me to learn. And so by going into it with that approach and not assuming I know everything allows me to
I know you took that on in the broad scheme of life, darling.
I suppose what it allows me to do is to sit back with an open mind. And sometimes people that have only been keeping 3 months, because they don't have that rose tinted glasses on yet, they've got a completely different way of looking at something, and they can turn something completely on its head for you and make you think a different way and a different approach to things. And that can be really beneficial.
I think through doing this podcast and just learning about how many different species are out there and how little even the smartest people know about so many species, I think that's probably going to be our best way to connect all of the camps. Like you said, like realizing how little we all know. Someone who might have been doing research for 30 years, there's still so many new species to learn about that this captive keeper might be researching on their own. And that is a great segue for us to talk about the blind snake.
Here's where I leave.
Because that's a snake we know nothing about.
Yeah, so Scalexophidians or blind snakes are an ancient lineage of snakes. They go back older than pythons. They're largely fossorial in nature, so they live a lot below the surface, and they tend to feed on ants. And as a result, because they tend to live in the same locations, being under the soil, eat a similar prey item, they tend to have evolved a similar morphology. So they all look basically the same. Very smooth scaled, usually small, and the features are quite conservative, I suppose. And so, because those features are conservative, we've often thought collectively that, you know, there wasn't that many different species out there. Well, with the start of the use of genetics have shown they're probably one of the most poorly sampled species of reptiles that are out there, and that there's a whole heap of species that sit undescribed. So if you want to name a new snake, blind snakes are where it's at. The problem is to look at blind snakes, and I looked at a absolute shitload of blind snakes for the snake, counting scales on them. You know, you've got a snake that is 400 millimeters long, so that's what, about 30 odd inches long. 20 odd inches long, and it might have 700 ventral scales.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
I was really lucky. I needed new glasses at the time, so I couldn't do it. My eyes were straining too bad.
Right. And they've got a body diameter of, I'm going over the inches for you. So their body diameter is about between an eighth and a quarter of an inch. Okay.
Oh.
So like the size of like a grey lead pencil, but like 3 times longer of a grey lead pencil. And they've got these tiny little scales that you literally need to count with a microscope. And so you go along and you're counting the scales, and then as you're counting the scales and you'll get down to like 526, somebody will come in and go, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And you're like, "Motherfucker, no!" Was I at 521 or 522? Oh, shit. And you start again at 0 and go again. That happens seemingly a hell of a lot. And so it's quite painful. But that's all right. You know, blind snakes are very interesting in that they aren't well found. They aren't easily found. They're very hard to target. And so they're poorly known number-wise. And as a result, when you start looking at them in museum collections and spirit collections, you start to realise that there's lots of things out there. We spoke briefly before we came on air. We were talking about the variation in them. You know, there was a paper that looked at the genetics on blind snakes across the world. And in Australia, we've got 49 species of blind snake described. Of that 49 species that are described, they think about a third, between a half and a third of the species actually described. So, you know, there's anywhere between 50 and 75 species of blind snake that are remaining to be described in Australia alone. Add that to Indonesia, Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, Africa. We're talking some massive numbers. Yeah, that's a very good sized blind snake there in some of those ones.
That's a good size.
I was going to say they're not your hands, are they?
Yeah. I'll put some photos up on Flickr and send some links through so you can get a bit of an idea of some of these things. The other thing about blind snakes is that they stink. So you know how you get mussed by a corn snake or something like that, and that's pretty bad? That's nothing. That's fine. You know, you can shower in corn snake musk compared to blind snake musk.
Oh my gosh!
You can literally start to like dry reach. It's that bad.
Wait, out of something like that tiny, it's so small.
Oh, yeah, and it's fucking funny watching somebody pick up a blind snake for the first time and it musts them. And they are probably the most painful animals to photograph. They are horrendous to photograph.
It's so fast.
They just don't stop moving. They're like little Tonka trucks. They just keep going and going and going.
And it's like, what's the mouth like? Because I saw pictures and I'm like, how does this thing eat?
Yeah, the mouth is like, they don't have, I don't think they've got teeth. I think they've got plates as I remember it. But the mouths on them are tiny. The eyes are under a couple of under a layer of scales, and it's basically just they can see light and dark. That's about it. They don't really make out shapes.
But it seems like
apparently
they
the
don't
sense of smell
protrude
is
at all.
fantastic.
They're like completely flat.
What's that? Sorry?
It seems like the eyes don't protrude at all. It's just like completely flat.
Oh no, it's below the There's the eyes do not come. There's no brill or anything like that, like a large spectacle or anything like that. It's there's no resolution in their vision. I don't think that's for sure.
It just seems like almost with as little as we study them, it's like an alien among us. As close as you can get, I guess, in the snake.
Yeah, they're pretty cool animals in that sense. Like they're really, really distinct. And I suppose there's interesting things that remain unknown about them at this stage. So we've got a couple of papers in the works on some interesting things with blind snakes. And until those things are published, we can't really talk about it. But they're very, very different.
Their idea of interesting may be different to yours, darling, when it comes to blind snakes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think they're cool anyway. What can I say?
Is there any idea?
Can't maintain them in captivity though. So.
Is there any idea like how genetically different, say, an Australian blind snake is than, say, one in the United States?
Oh, it's about as different as a dog to a horse.
Wow.
They're really radically different. Some of them are in complete different. They're in different families. They're in the same super family, which is Scalectophidia, but they're not even in the same family level. So some of the American blind snakes are in one family, and then you've got the Australian ones in a different one altogether. So it's like comparing a boa to a python or an elephant.
And do those differences exist within Australia between blind snakes species as well?
Well, at this stage, the ones that we've looked at, they're currently set up they're currently being looked at as in three genera. I think that'll probably change. It'll probably end up being more like 4 or 5 eventually. But at this stage, we've got them in 3 different genera, and yeah, I mean, look, it's invariably going to change. We've got fat ones and skinny ones, and short ones and long ones, and some that live. There's an actual troglodyte, which is a cave-dwelling animal that they only found when they did a mining bore, and they went down 70 meters, and as they pulled the soil out of the bore, they actually found this blind snake halfway down the bore, and they pulled this thing out, and that's this huge, long, tiny, thin thing. It's only about 3 millimeters round in diameter, and yet it's 49 centimeters long. So it's this ridiculously elongated, tiny snake that has 790 ventral scales. Yeah,
He loves that.
Yeah, I hated counting scales on that. But yeah, I mean that's a Nilios longissimus, and it's a fantastic critter, but it's an animal that we'd probably never see on the surface. And where they live is they live in there's like these limestone caves, and they think that they've evolved to be so long and thin, so they can actually make their way through the crooks and crannies in those limestone caves to find the ants and stuff like that they eat. So something that's incredibly derived like that is, to me, is something that's interesting. That to most reptile people, it's like, yeah, was that a worm, or when are you going to show me a snake that's interesting?
We all find our things.
And I feel like you've seen so many over 30 years, you may have gotten used to another carpet python, huh?
Or maybe like
python.
the big flashy, does the big flashy kind of wear off, or you go through like periods like, oh, this little worm is really cool. Because you
see more in the small thing. Yeah.
I mean, we're both into our photography as well. So, for me, I really enjoy photographing species I haven't seen before. So, you know, it's nothing for me to drive 2,000 kilometers to go and photograph a skink.
Or a freaking blind worm.
Or a blind snake or a frog. You know, I went looking, well, this is going back a few years ago, but I went looking for a particular species of leaf-tailed gecko that happens to live only on 2 hills. And it's a 15-kilometer walk into where you see the lizards from where you park the car. And it took me 6 goes to find one.
Wow. So what kind of research are you doing for a trip like that in order to make sure, you know, that you have your best shot?
No. But basically, nobody had photographed them. They've only been photographed by 3 people. So
you have nothing to go off of.
I'd spoken to 2. Yeah, so I spoke to 2 of the 3 people that had found them before, and they're like, "Yeah, you just go there, and they're on this hillside, and knock yourself out." And you sort of go there, and they literally are they're on a hillside, and so you park your car at the base of the hill, and there's an elevation change of about 400 meters, I suppose, which isn't that much, I suppose, but it's a 15-kilometer walk in and a 15-kilometer walk out.
I got a heavy breathing phone call, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
So it's like, you know, it's a 30K round trip to not see a fucking leaf-tailed gecko.
And you said it took you,
and you try doing
time?
it. Yeah, 6 times.
Oh,
yeah, I walked 180 kilometers for a fucking leaf-tailed gecko. I've got problems. Okay.
I mean,
you think we're thinner than what we actually are, but we're not.
That's 100 and almost 112 miles for the American.
To find one.
Yeah. And you know the worst part is, I only photographed one with a regenerated tail, so I haven't even got one with an original tail. and the OCD in me wants to actually go back and get one with an original tail. So yeah, that's probably going to happen at some point in time. So when I get one with an original tail, I'll let you know what the kilometer count is.
Well, it's a leaf tail after all. Is that the most important part?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it?
That's all he went for, was just a tail, and couldn't get that part.
Fucking things. But look, you know, they're awesome animals. I mean, going out, and I mean, I love field herping and seeing stuff in the bush. And you know, I think in fairness, I probably enjoy that more than looking at animals in captivity. But don't get me wrong, I love keeping animals in captivity. You know, we've got things like butler snakes that I love. Ty loves her pilbara death adders. Yeah, I mean, we love animals in captivity, but we also love getting out and seeing animals in the bush. I suppose it's almost like hunting, but instead of using a gun, you're using a camera.
Yeah, but they get to sit in a blind. They don't have to walk 112 miles to get that one deer that they want to kill.
Yeah, if you do it in the West, in Colorado.
Go to the grocery store. That's so wild. I mean,
I got no idea what you just said. It all just cut out. Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. It was not a good joke anyway.
Now we're gonna laugh anyway because you know we can't leave you hanging.
That's true dedication, though. I as you were speaking, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, what would I walk 112 miles for? I don't think I would even do it for like $1 million.
Is it dedication or stupidity?
It's an obsession that you didn't. I'm sure you didn't care how long it was going to take. Even if it took you 200 miles, that would be a great story to say. I dedicated myself and I'm obsessed enough with this gecko to go 200 miles. You know, to go see.
Yeah,
it.
that's what's on your tombstone.
I suppose too, it becomes there's a bit of stubbornness behind it as well. It's sort of like, no, I am going to catch you. I am going to find you. I'm going to get my photo, and I'm going to love it, and I'm going to have you, and I'm going to be enjoyable. Because if you don't get it, and until you find it, and see, this is the other thing you got to remember is that I'd walked 5 times before I actually found the bloody thing. So I'd walked that's 150 kilometers. I'd walked without finding the fucking gecko. So you do it on that last trip and you get it. It's like, oh well, hey, it's not so bad. So, but you are pretty excited when you do actually see the animal that you're hoping to see. That's for sure.
Yeah, and is it something that you typically share with other people, that you go with other people, or do you like to herp alone?
He's a bit anal when we go out, so we usually go alone.
A lot of music and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, look, it really depends. Look, I love going on trips with people and all the rest of it. These days, when we're doing stuff, we tend to target it around a research item of some description. So, we're assisting on some research projects for various bits and pieces, and so when we're doing a trip, we'll usually go on a trip where we're looking for something for a specific reason, as opposed to just going out and just generally herping for the sake of it. Whereas, we're going to be over in the States in a few months after herping time, and one of the things that I really want to see is rattlesnakes. So, we're going to spend a bit of time targeting different species of rattlesnake.
Probably not 150 miles, but anyway.
But I don't want to be walking 150 miles for a species of rattlesnake. But yeah, that's our plans anyway.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're going to the right place. So you'll definitely find yourself. I think we take advantage of how unique of an animal that is for us to have. Like, for us in America to have an animal like that, I mean, we should consider ourselves lucky.
Lucky to get some nice voice cracks in there.
Sorry, puberty.
I am so sorry we didn't get that.
No, I'm just saying, like, how unique of an animal that is. We should appreciate that. As Americans, we kind of, which you guys probably do with some of the species you have, like your carpet python. That's probably like our rat snake. We're like, whatever. But to us, if we saw a carpet python, we'd freak out.
Yeah, we get carpet pythons in our backyard.
So you're desensitized to them.
Yeah,
a very long time ago. Yes.
Yeah, we call them crappets over here. It doesn't. Yeah, they really don't. It's like, oh yeah, we've got to go see a carpet. Yeah, great.
We still get shocked when someone sees one for the first time, and we're like, oh, okay.
Oh, that's right. You wanted to see a carpet.
Yeah. On the excitement on that person's face.
Have you been able to guide some people from, say, America or from overseas over there in Australia?
Yeah, I took out the guys from Relocation Radio. A couple of guys out. Eric Burke, I took him out, got him a carpet python within like 5 minutes. So here's your carpet python, and then they were really excited over it. We took out Tommy Crutchfield over here when he was out. We've taken out a few other people as well and shown them various bits and pieces, whether it be carpet pythons or leaf-tailed geckos or venomous snakes. People from Argentina, people from Europe, we're people from all over Australia as well, and we don't mind if we can take somebody out and show them something that they haven't seen before, and we're available and it's something that we can do, then we're sort of happy to do that, and we hope that at some point in time those people can return the favor to us, and we get overseas and we get to go seeing something that that we don't usually see. So you say rat snake. I'd be excited to see a rat snake in the wild. I've never seen a rat snake. I don't think I've ever seen a rat snake in captivity, let alone in the wild. So, we don't keep exotic reptiles over here. So everything we keep is native. And so, the stuff that's commonly kept over in pet shops and things like that in the States is actually a big deal to us.
Yeah, we plan on doing a few pet shops just in case.
Yeah, it's like we have the appeal of saying, like, I want to see Owen Pellies, I want to see Parentes, but you guys, I mean, the whole rest of the world is open to you as far as like when you go to like Ham or one of our reptile shows. I mean, that's a brand new world.
Yeah, gosh, yeah.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I've seen one ball python, one individual ball python in all my time keeping reptiles.
Wait, what?
One. Single one. One ball python.
Was it an
And I think I've seen
albino
half a dozen
clown
horses.
spot nose? Or was it a black and
No,
brown?
it was just a regular,
Yeah.
normal looking ball python. And the couple of corn snakes I've seen have all been albinos.
Something that you guys would go, oh, over. We would
Yeah.
be like, oh my God, look at that.
That's a fucking corn snake. No, actually, I wouldn't be like that. Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, corn snakes are invasive over here now. How fucking
Really?
is that?
So where are they in Australia? Is there a certain range that
Have
they
you not
even
read
have?
our book?
Yeah. Well, if you got our book, we'd be able to tell you. No, look, they've turned up. They've turned up in Sydney. And when I say turned up, we're talking like about 200 individuals between Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne that turned up.
Wow.
Including juveniles and all the rest of it. So it's pretty horrible to have something like that. We don't know how they're going to react to the ecosystems over here. And they're largely a result of illegal keeping and accidental release. Accidental or deliberate release, I suppose.
And I could imagine that a corn snake
I
could
would hope
live
it was accidental.
anywhere in Australia.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
I could imagine that a corn snake could live almost anywhere in Australia.
Yeah, hopefully in the belly of a mulga snake.
So between, I mean, things like cane toads and things like obviously the wildfires and stuff, I mean, the environment, I mean, what has been going on? What's the extent of the damage done, whether it's from invasive species or wildfires and stuff like that?
Oh, look, for us, the one of the largest problems of invasive species here is cane toads. But then on top of that, you know, you've got things like Asian house geckos, Hemidactylus frenatus, box geckos, Hemidactylus carnoti, flower pot snakes, and smooth newts, vulgaris. They're all invasive herps in Australia in various places.
We've got feral cats, house cats,
feral cats, foxes, lots of different
Don't
birds.
you have like water buffalo
you know,
or
and
something
then
ridiculous like that?
yeah, water buffalo. We've got more camels here than they do in Arabia. Yeah, it's yeah. If you want to see how to fuck a nation, come to Australia. Have a look at our environmental record. It's terrible. Yeah, we've got some of the most fragmented and damaged habitat in Australia in the world. Yeah, so it's pretty abysmal what our government has done in 230 years of occupancy, I suppose. And you know, the reality of it is that the first settlers were from Europe. They came over here and they wanted to make Australia like Europe. Well, that doesn't fucking work. And so they released foxes, they released rabbits, they released, they brought their cats with them. The cats got out, they bred up, dogs, etc. And our animals, because they don't have any feline predators, they don't have any fox-like predators. They were never evolved to live and deal with predators like that. And so we've gone through huge rates of extinction of our native species as a direct result of introduction of other species.
And they don't really want to do too much in way of culling it, really, because you've got the snowflakes that get up on their high horse, it's alive, or we're supposed to keep our cats indoors. We have a cat, don't get me wrong, never step foot outside. But you've got all these people, especially people that keep birds and reptiles and whatnot, that, oh no, my cat makes a fuss, so I let it out. Doesn't kill too much. One thing is too much. So
we've got some very strong lobby groups over here as well in the agricultural sectors, and so we've got national parks that have got fucking horses living in it, and they don't want to shoot the horses because there's horses living in a national park. Well, the vegetation and the ecosystem is never designed to deal with a hoofed animal of all. So the horses come in, they go to a water system, and they trash all the vegetation around that water system. So because their feet aren't designed to deal with what we've got over here. So yeah, we've got massive issues with habitat destructions here, and there's no easy solution to it. That's for sure.
So it seems like, and we're going through as far as obviously you guys have been closed off. I mean, it must have been since the 70s but we have in Florida, I mean, we have some issues that you guys
on a
obviously
smaller
have
scale
seen for a while, and we're seeing some legislation and stuff like that. I mean, has closing down the country, I mean, has that really stopped all this stuff? I mean, clearly it hasn't stopped much from happening, but was the damage done before that happened? Before it was closed off?
Yeah, well, it's the problem. Yeah, look, the reality of it is that the massive damage that's been done to Australia is largely either pre-legislation in regards to importation of species, and it's not so much herps the issue. The corn snakes are something new. They're invasive, and the reason they've got out is because of people keeping them illegally. I don't think there's any real doubt about that. And so that's a direct problem that's a result of reptile keeping, I suppose. The Asian house geckos, the fox geckos, the cane, and the flower pot snakes, they were accidental introductions. The cane toads were a deliberate introduction. They put them to try and combat a thing called a cane beetle, which is an agricultural pest for sugarcane. The problem is the beetles climb up to the top of the stalks of the sugarcane. Cane toads don't climb, and so they weren't exactly an effective biological control agent. The issue is that the cane toads have got this fantastic toxin that they produce that protects them from being eaten by predators. Well, that's all well and good if you've evolved to live with cane toads. You get used to that poison and it doesn't kill you. It only makes you feel a little bit sick and you spit it out. In the case of our animals over here, they've never evolved with the toad, and so that
the red bellies at one point, thinned out so much.
So that they've never evolved with the toad toxin. So something that should only just make them feel a bit sick was killing them outright very quickly. So we saw massive losses of various species of frog-eating animal, whether it be quolls, which are a small type of mammal, goannas such as yellow-spotted monitors or Burton's water monitors, freshwater crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles, and about 30 species of snake, birds, etc. There's been so many animals die from bloody cane toads. But this is what happens when you release things that shouldn't be released. In regards to whether or not we should allow the exportation of reptiles or not, we were talking about this yesterday. It'd be a quick way to deal with smuggling is to allow controlled export of Australian wildlife through proper channels. If it went out through proper channels, people would be happier, I think, to pay a little bit of a premium for animals that were exported through the proper channels and done the right way. The animals are maintained properly. The animals that would be exported would only come from captive collections. There's ways and means that we could do that, and it would stop smuggling just like that.
Smuggling out, yes.
Yeah, smuggling out, not smuggling in.
Right.
Okay, I have two questions, and I know we're at an hour and a half, but shoot, I already forgot my first one.
Sneak them in there.
Oh, okay. First one is, because you've been herping for so many years, and you talked about, what's happened to these toads. What is the biggest change you've noticed over the 20 or so years? I think you said you've been herping because of the fragmentation or the evolution and everything like that.
You don't see anywhere near as many dead animals on the road as you used to, do you? Nowhere near.
Yeah, you don't see the amount of animals that you used to see, and the one thing that I've noticed, we've literally just driven 2.5. So it'll be about 2,000 kilometers in summer, in humidity, and we've barely had to clean the windscreen on the way down and back. So there's bugger all bugs. Now, if we're not seeing bugs, does that mean we're not going to see the stuff that eats the bugs? How long does that take to really come to town on that? But yeah, we've definitely seen a drop off in the number of individuals, and also the variation of different species as well. So, yeah. I'd love to tell you it's a good news story and we see lots of stuff, but no, it's not the case.
That makes sense. And then my second question was about the smuggling. Do you feel like smuggling is heavily
oh no, you're gonna put him in a tight spot here.
Uh-oh.
I don't know.
Is this a question I should not?
No, go for it.
All right.
Is it
No.
I mean, are people actually getting in trouble for it? That's really what I ask. Like, it's
not enough.
What's happening.
No.
It's people see other people getting a slap on the wrist, shall we say? I think the first decent thing was the footballer, yeah.
Yeah, we had a footballer over here that got 4 years jail for smuggling animals out. Mind you, it was like his second or third offence, I think, and the Department of Wildlife had to appeal the decision where he was getting a suspended sentence.
And people see that and go, well, the money's bigger than the trouble I could get in.
You know, the money that is in wildlife smuggling. I saw a thing. I think I was reading about it in either the Lizard King or one of those books. There's a couple that have come out, and when you read the facts and figures on it, the money that's in the wildlife trade is only just behind drugs and arms smuggling. So, but you don't go to jail for 20 years for smuggling an endangered species. And
I'm not going to lie, we have lists per state generally of what we're allowed to keep.
Yeah.
It sort of shits me that you guys are able to keep. Okay, so we have a demonstrator's license, so it's slightly different for us. But a normal, say, recreational wildlife license is for basic snakes only. You then have to apply for a bird license, But in Queensland, you can't just keep a kookaburra. You know what I mean? You can't just keep mammals or anything like that. Yet you guys are able to, and we can't, and they're our own native animals.
Sometimes it feels a bit rich when we see people keeping things like long-tail rock monitors, Glout Eye, or they've got a lot of things that are incredibly hard to see in the system over here in captivity, or completely non-existent in captivity in Australia.
$30
whereas you guys have got them in, and they're relatively common in some collections. It's crazy. So,
Yeah, those are the
But that's us
things
personally. That's not everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I want everyone to be able to keep everything, but some things scare the shit out of me. And yeah, I just try not to comment on them because people get mad. People are like, don't infringe on my rights to keep a damn tiger in my backyard. But
is that what they sound like? People who want tigers? Yeah. Interesting.
All of them, 100%.
All those people.
But I don't want to say who's
topic. We're going to upset someone anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not anyone to tell anyone what to do.
But I do think it's unfair that we have things that are from Australia and they can't even keep them, and they're there and we have them. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Yeah. That
the world unfortunately isn't a fair place, is it? You got to build a bridge to get over it.
I mean, this topic's, I guess, a hot one. You're going to upset someone somewhere with a comment either way. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I wish we were able to at least get exports from Australia. I think that would be nice as far as it would probably help you guys out as far as your market, since it seems like you guys have so many so many things to get registered and stuff, and licenses and stuff to go through. It seems to be more difficult to keep over there.
Yeah, it can be painful. I mean,
It's a dream, just in case Parks is watching.
Look, it depends. I mean, to give you an idea, my permit application was 400 pages.
Wait.
So can you imagine what it's like to have to fill out a 400-page document to keep a corn snake?
Now, someone who just wanted to do it like recreational keeper, theirs would be that long, or is that just for your special license?
No, theirs is pretty easy. It's because we're educating the public.
Okay.
And so we've got a whole heap of things. So we need to provide copies of our emergency management plans, our species management plans, facility construction, veterinary sort of systems, transportation, etc. It just gets
a recreational license. You just answer the question, tick the boxes, hand over the money, and then download your license number, basically. Well, in Queensland, anyway.
And then I'm guessing if you want to breed, there's a different level too.
No, it's not so much that. It's if you want to keep venomous. So if you want to keep venomous, there's a few other things you need to jump through. But that's not the end of the world, I suppose. Keeping a taipan or a brown snake's probably a little bit more. You need to be a little bit more switched on keeping them than you do keeping a corn snake, I suppose. But the mechanics of keeping them themselves is pretty much the same. They eat rodents, they shit out the other end. You keep the cage clean. The main difference is you want to make sure that they can't get out and that you don't get bitten by it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the scariest thing is that we have. Well, like we have colubrids who jump out of tubs and stuff, and we have colubrids that jump out when you open up their enclosures. So it's like, yeah, I can imagine a lapids have a similar characteristics to them, and I would be very frightened. That's why I don't keep a lapids.
It's character building.
But to a lot of people will believe old-timer terms, like apparently lapids don't climb. The amount of times we've walked in there and they're hanging off the top of the cage, but oh no, I'll just grab that out of the tree. It's a brown snake, but no, it's not, because they don't climb. So you sort of fight that as well.
Gotcha.
Change of subject.
I suppose it.
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
go. No, you go.
No, you're right.
No.
Let's fight about it.
I was gonna change subject, so you go.
Yeah.
No, you change the subject.
Well, I was gonna say before we let you go, I wanted you to speak about Herpeton.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm coming out to speak at Herpeton.
I'm coming for a holiday.
Ty's coming as well to catch rattlesnakes. And yeah, so that's something that we're really keen on. So I'm speaking about blue tongue skinks and talking about 30 years of chasing blue tongues in the wild and basically talking about blue tongues in the wild and also in captivity. And then I'm also talking about monitors as well. And so the monitors that we've seen in the wild and how that influences the way that we keep our monitors these days after seeing a lot of these species in the wild. And so enclosure design and setup and how we set up our external enclosures in particular and design of those and how we improve on things, because at the end of the day, where we make mistakes and all the rest of it, the best thing we can do is try and impart a bit of knowledge and explain where we've made some mistakes and how we can improve on that. So.
Did you just hear he admitted that he made mistakes? I'll have to do this more with you.
Yeah, so that's that. So look, I really encourage anyone that gets the opportunity to get across to Herpeton and come and have a look at the talks and stuff like that. Besides my ugly mug speaking, there's a whole heap of other really knowledgeable people that are talking at it and talking about all aspects of it. If you jump on Brian Cusco's YouTube channel, he's been putting up some of the talks from the 2019 Herpeton conference where you have people like Nick Mutton and Alan on Repashy, all talking about various bits and pieces of the hobby. There's been some really good, interesting talks on positive herpetoculture, and Scott Styles been doing some talks on veterinary aspects and all sorts of stuff. There's some really good stuff there, and getting along and supporting the community is always a good thing. So yeah, I'd like to see more of those sorts of things happening. And hey, look, we're always happy to speak at overseas conferences as well. That's not
just
a problem.
haul yourself out.
Yeah.
Hey man, that's
Shit, I'll
not
come
a
to a
bad
carpet
gig.
fest and someone pays for a ticket.
Everyone's
We're
trying to
not
get there, though. We're all trying to get to Australia. So we're not trying to.
Yeah, so you do it the cheap way and bring the Australian to you. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, no. Look, I think Herpeton's going to be great. I mean, the IHS Expo that's in June, I think it is going to be really good too. There's the Venom Week conference as well that's coming up as well. There's a heap of good stuff happening over there, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to see all these
Interesting
things popping up that are both advancing herpetoculture as well as things like Venom Week is obviously a totally different story, and advancing everyone's knowledge on reptiles and the animals that we all love. As for you guys, where can people find your book? Obviously, we need to buy it as well. And where can they find you?
Honestly, the best place to get that stuff is from the website, which is www.wildlifedemonstrations.com. Otherwise, you can hit us up on Facebook, Nature for You, or shoot either me or Ty a friend request or whatever. And we're happy to talk reptiles and all the rest of it. I'm a bit of a whore when it comes to talking about reptiles. I'll talk to anyone and anyone about anything. That's fine.
Was the gecko on your main page? I think at the Nature for You. Was that the one that you hiked for?
No. That's a beautiful velvet gecko. That's Oidurabella. They're a beautiful gecko that haven't been called a beautiful gecko. They're a stunning species from rock faces in the northwestern Queensland. They took me a fair bit of time to find initially, but once I found them, I've sort of got them figured out now. I know where to see them. but stunningly beautiful little geckos, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sorry to bring up another thing when we said we were going to end it, but I just wanted to sneak that one in there too.
No, that's right. That's fine.
As for us, PortCityPythons.com, Port City Pythons Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Port City Pet on YouTube
Also,
if you want to check out our new channel. We just filmed a video today. I don't know when it will be out. Hopefully in the next couple of days. So thank you guys for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Scott and Ty, for coming on and being our first Australia guest. And thank you.
Happy days. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. And thank you for sitting in a hot car for an hour and 45 minutes.
That's all right. The check's in the mail, hey?
Your plane ticket's coming soon.
Oh, I love you.
Love your work.
All right, guys, we will catch you next week.
Bye.
So
Take
Scott
care,
and Ty
guys.
will
Yeah.
be on